Welcome back to another episode of Out of the Blank Podcast. Paul is back. He has taken his journey through Dallas. He has done many things since we've last talked. Paul, it's good to see you, man. Did you mind introducing yourself to everyone out there listening?
Hey, Robbie. Yeah, it's good to be with you. It's been a minute, mate. We've missed you. So Paul Abbott's my name. 18 months ago, 2024, I wrote and published a book called Death to Justice, the shooting of Lee Harvey Oswald. So it's a book solely focused on the shooting of Lee Harvey Oswald, and that came off the back of some work I did with creating an index for former New Orleans District Attorney Jim Garrison's surviving files. So I found in there, nothing that wasn't already public, but just going through, a lot of witness statements from Dallas police, some from news media, FBI reports, and some Warren Commission excerpts. So I just started to see some, I don't know, just some really surprising and confusing narratives around, the whole arrangements for Lee Oswald's transfer from obviously Dallas City Hall to west to the Dallas County Jail on that weekend of November 22nd. And I really created a real summary of all these statements. And before I knew it, I could see some really, some really interesting threads to do with that weekend. And, to be honest, the book kind of wrote itself there for a while. And it all culminates with a bit of a hypothesis on how the Oswald shooting could have taken place. That's my book. I've also got an accompanying YouTube channel. I don't put too much on there because really it was just originally it was meant to be an accompaniment to the book. So all of the known footage of the Oswald shooting and anything related is on there, as well as some little clips that I created. And most recently, and this is probably a good segue, a bit of a walk around that I took when I was in Dallas last year for the JFK Lancer conference. So I've also got a Substack channel as well, which I've put some articles out, and I think I've come onto your show to talk about a few of those articles as they've come out. So it's an interesting topic, and the Oswald shooting in comparison to President Kennedy's assassination that weekend, it's obviously kind of taken a bit of a back seat. And when you think about Police Officer Tippett's murder as well, it's Oswald's convenient silencing is almost a convenient full sentence stop on what I can only imagine to be a horrible weekend in US and world history as well. So yeah,
So you went for the conference in Dallas.
I did. So went over with my fiance, and we spent a good 10 days in Dallas. It was awesome. It was so good, and I'd really recommend to anyone out there, if you can get to the conferences, of the around that weekend of November, do get along. A lot of effort goes into organising them. There's a couple, they're kind of almost like rivals, but really, really good speakers at both events. So for me, because we were there for a good 10 days, literally a week before the conference started, I wanted to get my land legs and go and check out a lot of the sites. So even got to go over to Fort Worth for a bit of a day trip. I'm not sure if you know her or know of her, but Gail Nix Jackson very kindly let me send my books to her so I could sell them at the conference. So I got to meet Gail in Fort Worth, which was really good. I checked out the ballroom at the Hotel Texas, where JFK gave his last speech. So we got to kind of walk in there, and no one else was there. But the ballroom is, it's almost the same as it was back then. The same wood paneling on the walls. So that was pretty neat. Caught up with a friend of yours as well, Scott Reed. He was in Dallas for conference season as well, and he and I and Ryan Lusk headed back out to Fort Worth to Chris Gallup's symposium, which is kind of like a mini conference. It's done over a morning and lunch. And
I think Chris's thing is the continuing inquiry. I believe it's what's called.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, so that was amazing. I mean, I think. for someone coming from Australia who's only ever read the books of people that has got me fascinated on the topic. To actually finally meet some of these people, like J. Gary Shaw, Brian Edwards, Casey Quinlan, Jeff Meek, some really, really standout people were at the Chris Gallup event, Robert Groden as well. So I got to speak there, went out to Oswald's grave, that's very close by. And of course, in Dallas, I got to do a proper look around the Dallas City Hall. Of course, you can't go in there. Apparently, it's really, really hard to go actually inside if you're not a student or a member of faculty and go and see the.
It's like the Vatican? I need 6 recommendations from 6 different churches.
It's really strange because a lot of money, if you Google it, it's I think it was in 2019 there was a big redevelopment and like a bit, real preservation project to maintain the jail cell block up on the 5th floor. The wall where Oswald had his mugshot taken is preserved. The jail office, there's screens through there. That's in the original configuration, and it's pretty high tech and stuff. But right where Oswald was shot, there's like a glass wall, and it's really weird. I'm not that I've seen it firsthand. I'm just going on what other people told me. But it frosts and defrosts every 30 seconds, so you can see out to the basement garage, and that's still in its original configuration as well. So a lot of money and effort's gone into
Commercialization.
it's strange, but they're not letting anyone down there, so it's not even a public exhibit. So very weird, but for me it was really good because I was able to really walk around and survey outside the Dallas City Hall, and for anyone out there that's interested and is ever in Dallas, go and do it because it's in the original exterior configuration as it was back in '63. So you can still see the top of the Main Street ramp where Roy Vaughan was standing and where Jack Ruby was alleged to have walked down. The steps are all there. The entrance where I think and a few others, John Armstrong and people like that, posit that Jack Ruby actually entered. That door is still there. So it's all in its kind of same external configuration, and it was really cool because during the conference I actually took some groups, did like some walking tours around the outside of the city hall. So people that were at the conference and I had people like Scott Reed coming along. I did something with Jess Cannell. So I filmed something for her YouTube channel. And while we were doing that, we were interrupted by some people who were cheering from Main Street. We were actually standing in that vacant block next to the annex building. And it was Matt Crumpton, Mark Adamczyk, Andrew Isler, Joe Borelli walking along Main Street to get breakfast from somewhere, and so they came over, and we were having a bit of a chat. So right where Jack Ruby most likely entered the basement is we were standing there having a really good conversation. So quite surreal at times, to meet people like I say that you only ever speak with over a podcast or emails or only ever read the books of. Bill Simpich was there. That's another name to drop. It was really good, and I just finished the point by saying recommend to people to get along because it's not the same experience as it is digital watching something over a stream. If you can get there, really do it. And Robbie, it was good to meet a few of your listeners too. They are at the conference and came up and said good day as well. So
Wait, they said good day, like, hey, I listened to the show, and
yeah, I got a few good days, but no, absolutely. Some people that said that they've listened to some of our conversations, came up and said hello. So it was really cool.
that's awesome. That's exactly why I'm not going. I hate being recognized. Is why I don't go into Walmart if it's like after 7 a.m. because it's just terrible. No, I wanted to go this year and go down there and be able to do that, but it was just a hectic year this year. But hopefully, I'm going to see if me and my fiance will be able to go down to Dallas and do the whole thing. She knows I have a large interest in it, and it's great because her parents have a huge interest in it. I was like, how have we never talked about JFK? And they're like, what would you know about JFK? I'm like, oh, let me You tell me what you know or where you have holes, and I'll try and give you some reasonable things to choose from. Again, I don't have an opinion on the whole who did it thing. I'm more like, let's look at the fact.
Yeah. Have you ever been to Dallas?
Mm-mm. I was supposed to go this year or this past year, but just things didn't line up. So hopefully I'll be able to make it down there this year. I'd like to be able to look at it. I have a question for you. Did you see the book depository building and did you go into it? Was it able to be accessible?
Yeah, went into the book depository. It's a bit of a, the yeah, it's good to do because I have some artifacts, some pretty interesting things like the original FBI mock-up of Dealey Plaza. It's a big scale model. Just interesting artifacts. But if you go in there thinking, "Look, this is really cool," but I think most serious researchers into the assassination of President Kennedy will understand that there was never any evidence that concluded that Oswald fired a gun from up in the sixth floor. So we did the museum, and I like the Bill Hicks joke. I don't know if you ever heard it.
That's what I was going to quote was like, you can't even see the road. But what was it? What was he talking about? He said, I don't know how he could even hit the road, man. He can't even see it. He goes, there's no fucking way, man. And then he starts talking about even if a couple of pigeons took them up by like the back of his shirt and lifted them out onto the street. And he goes, I heard a couple anti-Castro pigeons talking about a coup.
Yeah. And he goes, the sixth floor window is really realistic because they've got the boxes from back in the air, and it's so realistic. Oswald isn't there either. So that always makes me laugh.
That's what I was going to ask. If you were able to look out the window and be able to see how far the road, because everyone always says if you go there, you can see it could be like, I think Joe Rogan spouts it now about it being a reasonable shot. And that's not even like the question I really have. The main thing is just like, there was a lot of people that spent a lot of time covering it up, where that alone is issues. That alone is something that needs to be brought up. But were you able to see, like, I mean, was there a lot of people there? I mean, younger generations? I mean, is there still large crowds going?
There was, and that was the cool thing. Like, it was really, really good to see so many young people in the museum, but also around Dealey Plaza. I avoided it on the day of the anniversary, so I didn't go down there on the 22nd. But in the museum itself, there was a real good mix of people walking through, and all cultures, all backgrounds. It's really good. But the window itself, of course you get an even better view of Houston Street. The road approaching the book depository as opposed to Elm Street that's going away from it. But you can take a photo out through that window. Obviously, the plastic, there's a big plastic shield around it, but you can get pretty close. And I'd just say to anyone, it's worth going there, even if it's just once, because I do have some pretty interesting artifacts and things like that. But take a walk around Dealey Plaza. I think it'll surprise most people that how small Dealey Plaza is and how much of a decline. The angle of the road was still goes downwards. A lot of people don't realise, but if you stand at the top of Elm Street and Houston Street, under where the book depository is, it actually you're exactly level with the railway overpass that Kennedy was being driven towards when he was shot. So it gives you a bit of an idea of the trajectory. It's steep, really is. And of course, you don't even see that in the Zapruder footage, really. You don't really get so much of a sense of that. I think that'll be one of the things that really surprises. But I couldn't help myself. I had to go over to the south. Everyone's having a look at the grassy knoll and where Zapruder was standing, and I just dragged Sarah, my fiance, along with me over the railway overpass and was checking out the South Knoll, which, there was some pretty early, very, very early reports of someone fleeing from there after the shots. So having a look at the angles, hard to rule it out. But I'm no expert marksman.
Did you confirm anything or absolve anything when it came to your opinions on just looking at the location and all the things that you've kind of learned, and then finally get to see the place? I mean, and also encountering certain individuals that have different theories. I'm sure someone was trying to sell a book there, but at the same time, it gets a little bit difficult. I get in the comments all the time, this. Okay, I
Oh
mean,
no, I got to on the Monday that I was there. I got down to Dealey Plaza a little bit early. I'm not sure if you've heard of him, but his name's Matt Douthit, and he's very good on the Tippett side of things. I teed up to do a bit of a tour of the Tippett, the whole Tippett scene with him. But anyway, before I got to before he came to meet with me, I got to sit in Dealey Plaza on my own, like really early on a Monday morning. I mean, cars were going up and down the streets through Dealey Plaza, but there was no one around for a good 20 minutes. And just to sit there um, and take it all in, you feel the history in Dealey Plaza. You really do, and especially when you have the fortune of being there on your own at a pretty civil hour. But while I was sitting there, this chap came up to me just to say hello. He wasn't anyone that I recognised, or he didn't seem to recognise me either. But he it's like he just got off the plane and came to Dealey Plaza, and he just had all this stuff to say about you know it must have been Oswald because it's so small here, and it's not that hard of a shot. And I'm just letting him talk, and I'd get a bit of a word in edgeways to go. Well, look, evidence wise, there was really nothing that tied Oswald to the sixth floor, the sixth floor window, and he just wasn't listening. It's like it was like he was just waiting for me to stop talking so he could keep talking. So the reason I bring that up is I think it's a place that, because it's so significant, and people from all around the world and all around the United States, maybe only ever go there once after reading about it and seeing so much about it, and to actually be there, it's really surreal. It has an effect on you. In terms of any big revelations for me, not really. I was just interested to see. I don't know if you know the configuration of the railway overpass, but all I wanted to see, this is really nerdy, was if the edges kind of angle off to the parallel knolls, because I think that's where someone, if anyone was going to be shooting off the bridge, it would have been tucked right in that corner, and where the angle of the bridge railing trails off to the other knoll. That's literally all I wanted to see when I was in Dealey Plaza. I'd been there before, so it was just for me. It was really cool just to take in the location, but also see how many young people were around, and also at the conference as well. It was really really good, and that's the way it should be. It was a world changing event, and people may get sick of me saying this, but it wasn't just a significant event for American history; it was for world history. So it's good to see that people are observing that in Dallas.
I wonder if that was just from the basis of all these documentaries that keep coming out about JFK, or like I think there was like supposed to be like four movies and they ended up not happening, but there's like Netflix keeps adding them on there, like older ones or something like that. But also the Charlie Kirk stuff that happened. I wonder if a lot of my generation hopped on that because I was watching it when it happened, and then watching all the news reporting afterwards, and they kept relating it to the JFK assassination, and they kept relating it to like all this other stuff, and I'm like, I don't think that's correct. You can't really do that. I mean, it is an assassination, yes, and it's the first one we've had since like for a while now. But at the same time, like the mistakes and the things that you're talking about, they were aiming more towards like the Manlycore Carcano is you, and it's like, blah, 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 blah. This is 2025. We have so many better options to choose from. Not saying do it. I'm just saying it was just weird how the news was reporting on it and making it like, I don't know, some like, let's see the errors in this reporting and then see what's going to change, like a day later or 2 days later. I think at first it started, he was a right wing because of his dad or something like that. And then they checked the bullets and there was something completely opposite. Like, I don't know. It was just, to me, it was like interesting to watch. And I wondered if that's what sparked up popularity. But I wanted to kind of bring it to, so people can look at your past episodes on here. You have confirmed my belief that Jack Ruby was basically brought in by the Dallas police to silence Oswald. not an act of patriotic indignation or anything like that. But I think Dallas police got the wrong person, or just got anyone that had fit a communist background profile, because they had a list of those people, knew where he was at, picked him up, brought him to the headquarters, and we're going to basically lay him out like railroad over him. And then when they realized that this was going to evolve out of Dallas, they had to get Jack Ruby in there to silence him. What we have confirmed is that we know that there was a crap ton of people in that basement, from different reporters and police officers. I don't think anybody was armed. I believe they took all the guns out beforehand, before the transfer was about to occur.
Well, this is the weird thing. Even in my book, I lay out that there were police officers reported as having shotguns in the basement before and after the shooting. And it's interesting because this latest potential revelation of the identification of the Japanese reporter, apparently he said that there were police all over the place holding rifles. I'm just absolutely gobsmacked by that, because in all of the footage post the Oswald shooting, and this is the thing, we've got a lot. We have a lot of, before the shooting as well, like literally 20 minutes worth almost, and then another 10 minutes after, and it's just literally filming the whole scene. You never see a single shotgun or rifle or anything like that. So where the hell were these guns? Because yes, there were a whole bunch that were taken out of squad cars trunks, during the search of the basement. That's true, but in actual footage, video evidence, I've not seen any police officers with rifles. That's for sure.
Now, even the police, the guy, the unidentified reporter who's identified now, even his recollection, can it be correct? It's the thing. Did he see cops outside with guns, like the ones that were guarding the armored truck as it was backing in? Or did he actually pay attention in the basement to be able to soak in if anybody had a gun on him? The issue with that is that if all guns were removed from the basement and Jack Ruby did his act, nobody could shoot Jack Ruby and take him out. They would just have to arrest him or grab him to the ground. And that's what all the cops did. So I'm curious if that was like these people didn't know, like some cops weren't in the know, but some were, like the head people running the things. And then again, Jack Ruby still lives, afterwards, instead of getting shot. So maybe that's a good way of making sure that, Jack Ruby's friend with the police. Well, it's a good way to get him to do this act without really getting any penalty. I mean, he's screaming the whole time saying, "What are you guys doing? Like, why are you arresting me?" Like, he's trying to let them know, like, I did you guys a favor. And I think it's because some of those cops probably weren't in the know. But also looks too. It could have been a thing of, we have to make it look like we're actually doing our job, rather than just be like, "Hey, good job," and then patting them on the back and letting them walk away.
Well, I think a lot of the detectives were they would have had sidearms, surely. I never read any testimony of there being a systematic. Everyone, no one carrying weapons or anything like that. So they might have had holstered, revolvers. Some of the detectives, but yeah, the point is there were no long-barreled, shotguns or rifles to be seen, and even that Japanese reporter who well, I forget what his name is, could potentially be, but we'll go into that a little bit later. He's seen in the footage that originally started up on Commerce Street, and filmed the armored truck backing into position, and you can see the Japanese reporter with other reporters just milling around and then just kind of walking down the side of the armored truck. So, but by that logic, he wouldn't have been down in the basement to see all these rifles being handled by, or shotguns being handled by, Dallas police officials that had removed them during the search, because the search was done and dusted by like 10 o'clock, maybe 10:15. So, and the armored truck, we know, thanks to that footage, only arrived 13 minutes before the shooting. So when we've got the benefit of that footage, and then what people say, and there's a contradiction. It's like, well, what did you see? Because the video evidence, the visual evidence that we have says something completely different. And the same goes for, I'm sure most people out there have seen footage of Oswald shooting. It's very quick. It's very dramatic. But apparently Jack Ruby was meant to have said a combination of words and sentences at the time of shooting Oswald, like, "You rat son of a bitch, you killed our president," or, words to that effect. Well, he can't be heard in any of the audio, or the visual, the film of the event. It's crazy. Ike Pappas was, he was in the white trench coat, and he just asked Oswald a question before the shooting. Gary DeLorme was kind of in front of where the shooting took place. So they had these, microphones which had like a 4 meter, range, to pick up audio, and their audio you can still hear now, and there's no such utterance, made by Jack Ruby that can be heard. So that's what really got me hooked on this case, was just very clear contradictions in, from the evidence versus what people said. It's I still scratched my head about it. It's like there were two shootings, because people are witnessing something that, talking about, hearing and seeing all these things which very clearly did not take place in the actual, the visual of the shooting. It's
Well, we know
crazy.
about the shooting too. Is that like them bringing him back inside and then bringing him back out? It wasn't Oswald going right into the ambulance from that, but the original like shooting a thing that I think we all have seen, or the one that gets popularized, is a quick shot to the gut and then an ambulance is there. And the next thing you know, he's getting put into the car when that's not it at all. There's a whole thing where he goes back into the police basement and they pull his body back out. I think that's important. The longer version I saw of yours definitely filled in some more context. But what would be the motive to get Jack Ruby to do this? That's what I always kind of was like thinking about. Was kind of like, he could have got anybody. They could have drove him in the armored truck and then say he reached for somebody's gun and he shot, and next he was dead on the side of the road on the way to the transfer thing. But instead, it was like the Dallas police basement had to be that. Now, I do not believe Ruby did it for patriotic whatever. I think he was getting some type of benefit from it, and I just don't know what exactly that is. Maybe he thought he was going to be a hero, but at the same time, I don't know. It's difficult because, again, motive is what usually people try and look for when they're analyzing a crime.
Mm. I think they wanted another lone nut, a lone nut to kill the lone
And we
nut.
don't have enough of those already.
Exactly. But the thing is, and this is kind of the level of detail.
What was it? Lance Armstrong, Neil Armstrong? No, Lance Armstrong. He's a lone nut, right? He only has one ball.
That's it.
Sorry.
Too soon. The thing is, I say this in my book, I don't think the plan relied on how good a shot Jack Ruby was. All he had to do was take a gut shot at Oswald, whether it was an actual bullet or it was a blank or whatever, and the plan hinged on how Oswald was handled in that moment. So if there was a genuine attempt to save his life, he would have been put straight into the car that he was being moved to, and they could have been out of there and on their way to Parkland Hospital in a matter of seconds. And I still hear and see of people today who don't understand that there was a delay of almost, I think it's about 4 minutes, maybe a little bit less than that. That Oswald was in the jail office before being brought out on a stretcher by the two ambulance attendants and hauled away in the ambulance, which had to wait even before it could leave the basement because the armored truck took its sweet time getting out of the way, because that was apparently still parked up on the the Commerce Street entrance. So I think people, that the lead there is that it didn't rely on Jack Ruby being a good shot. I mean, it's hard to miss when you're point blank, but Jack Ruby didn't shoot Oswald in the head. That would have been a sure thing. He shot him in the abdomen. Oswald was wearing a black jumper. So I think the plan literally relied on Oswald being taken back to the jail office, out of the the eyes of the media, and God knows what was done to him back there. The wound might have been exacerbated. It certainly was when Fred Bieberdorf, the first aid attendant, finally got there, because when he thought that he couldn't hear a heartbeat, he started doing manual chest compressions on Oswald, which is the worst thing you could do for anyone that's just been shot through the abdomen, through the ribs as well. So not a low shot. It was literally through the ribs. So I think the whole plan, there was two elements: get Jack Ruby into place, and the response to the shooting. And that was it. That's what killed Oswald, was the response to however he was shot out in the basement in front of the cameras.
Did you follow Ruby's trial at all? The trial and then the subsequent one after?
Yeah, I cover it a little bit in my book. Deliberately, though. I know other people have done good things on that. Seth Cantor, I would still recommend his book.
See, I'm questionable about him now. I do believe his statements about what he saw there, but I started to notice when after he wrote his book on Ruby, he decided to write another one about LBJ, and he started looking
Oh,
into
really?
a lot of the things that people believe about LBJ, mostly the oil connection stuff, but a lot of theories that aren't necessarily true. Um, which, look, I've drifted more into the Johnson administration from my time away, just from the tapes, because I find it very interesting. And I've kind of gotten a more balanced perspective. I don't think he was behind it, but I think he's like a lot of people that should have been doing their job, which is he didn't care and they just kind of wanted to move forward. And I think more people cared about their reelection process than he did about looking into the Kennedy assassination. Uh, but the oil connection stuff's there, but Cantor writes about that. But he also goes a little bit farther, like saying that Johnson had affairs in the White House. That's why a buzzer was put into the White House. I have the phone call of when he called asking for a buzzer, and it was because Juanita Roberts, his secretary, kept running into the room whenever he was just talking privately with someone or if he was in a meeting. And he was like, I get it. She has to tell me this, but I need something so I don't have to worry about like interrupting and stopping because someone just runs in the room like it's an
That's
emergency.
fair. That's fair.
But Seth Cantor wrote about that stuff, and that's why some of his stuff I was like maybe in the beginning, but Thomas Noguchi's the same way, guy who did the autopsy for RFK. Fast forward to Natalie Wood's death, he's talking about just a drunk actress falling off a boat, not the fact that he called uh, other doctors who were investigators of homicide and other things of domestic abuse because she had markings of domestic abuse on her body. But he went on TV and started saying, "Oh, it's just a drunk actress falling off a boat and all this stuff." And then Frank Sinatra went after him, uh, told him he was going to lose his credentials. So again, I think eventually fame and all this type of stuff gets to your head. Maybe that happened with Cantor a little bit. But again, I trust his statements somewhat in the beginning.
Yeah, I think you can't always be right, and it's an easy thing to do sometimes, is to dismiss someone, because they've. And I'm not saying you in this instance, but in general, like I talk about someone like John Armstrong, who does the whole Harvey and two Oswalds theory. That's a lot to take in, but so you don't have to believe that. It might be a little bit too far fetched, but geez, he's done some really good work on the Tippett side of things, and Oswald's get away from the book depository. So just because someone does some bad work, or some controversial, or something that doesn't align, it doesn't mean the whole bathwater has to be thrown out with the baby. And I think Cantor, he, in his book, though, I do refer to it, but he doesn't go far enough. Um, even with he met with quite a few of the Dallas police officials, and this was around the time of the HSCA when he was putting this book together. I think maybe a little bit sooner. So it was him and Earl Goals at that time that were probably the most prolific. I'm not sure if Cantor was back in Dallas at that time, because he was Dallas. He was from Dallas, and joined the White House press corps. But he picked up on some leads and just did not pursue them. So that is where I become a little bit wary. But his stuff on the Ruby trial is pretty good. I mean, Ruby himself, he was at the hands of someone like Melvin Belli, who was like a showbiz lawyer who agreed to represent Ruby if he could get some kind of book deal out of it or something. He was in it for the notoriety. He didn't do Ruby too much good in the beginning. He So that was the up until the trial in March, and a little bit after that, I think, and at least until 65, when because Ruby kept going back to appeal against his death sentence that he'd been handed mid March of 64 for killing Oswald. And that in itself is interesting because several Dallas police officers were instrumental in Ruby being handed that sentence, because the evidence that they gave showed premeditation on Ruby's part, which meant murder with malice. It couldn't just be a murder, a spontaneous murder with passion. What these police officers, so Patrick Dean, McMillan, Archer, Clardy, these Dallas police officers that handled Ruby initially up on the fifth floor jail after he shot Oswald. Dean was instrumental in putting words in Ruby's mouth about saying, when I saw Oswald at the press conference, I saw him smirk, and that's when I knew I wanted to kill him, and all these things, they attributed to Ruby saying when he hadn't officially been charged with anything yet and hadn't got to speak to a lawyer. They piled on Ruby in that trial and were instrumental in him getting the death sentence. When it's a pretty it's almost tenable to believe that whoever was behind Oswald's shooting, that the pitch to Ruby would have said, look, we need someone to take Oswald out. If you do it, even if you come in and take a shot at him in point blank in the abdomen, you'd be doing us a big favor. And it'll be a crime of passion. You'll get 2 years maximum or however long. You'll walk out a hero. All of your debts will be paid off. Yada yada yada. That's how Ruby potentially could have been pitched to do the job. But the thing was, Dallas police turned on him almost instantly. With all these alleged statements that he made, that indicated premeditation on his part. So, his legal process didn't really get off to a flying start, and he was eventually granted a retrial. I think it was going to be in Nebraska, Little Lincoln, Nebraska, I think. Still would have been a Texas state trial, I believe, but it just would have been obviously in another state for fear of a biased jury. But of course, Ruby died of cancer and having been to all kinds of lengths of insanity in the years before. Lewis West Jolly, Jolly West, visited him. He was a nutcase, and I wonder if that was brought on as well after the fact.
I think there was multifactorial there because you had Judge Joe Brown, who was proceeding over that in the first time, and then he ended up having to step down from it because he was writing a book as the trial was going on and really selling vanity. A lot of people were, but I think it was a secondary lawyer, Robert something, and I know you hate oral histories, but he's one of the oral histories we played in the past, and he talked about that when Melvin Belli brought up that whole insanity thing, that he was like, you're trying to sell the sun. Like, it's like, what are you doing here? And nobody believed it. I don't even think Melvin Belli believed it himself, but it was only to save him from the death penalty. So again, J. Lee Rankin in the Warren Commission, he speaks to the HSCA and talks about that they can never establish Ruby's motive. And that's always been a lingering question for the commission and others. Burt Griffin even talked about that, about not being able to establish Ruby's motive. The one that's written is not one that they believe could be the truth. So we have to go into this big question here of what could have been his motive. And that whole thing, these people not believing it, despite whatever the history books say was his motive. The lot gets brought up, mob stuff, all these different theories. Again, I think with the whole, like the secondary lawyer I mentioned before, he talked about that he was shocked that Ruby didn't do anything on the first trial that they had. He didn't say a single word. He just sat there. And he was like, are you going to defend yourself? Are you going to make a statement or anything like that? And he just wouldn't answer, just was watching it. So when he starts going crazy is when we start to see a little bit of the problems in the trial and a bit more vocalness. But early on, he's not speaking. Does that mean that he knows that he's going to not get the death penalty? And then when he's given that, he's like, wait a minute, what? Let me hold on. Let me do a retrial. Let me defend myself here again.
Makes sense. Makes sense because what Patrick Dean in particular, it was. I think it was ruled inadmissible, but the jury still heard it. You know, these statements that he alleged that Ruby said. So I think when if Ruby was present to hear that, I think he would have learned pretty quickly that, oh, geez, the DPD are turning on me, or they're the ones that are going to be, you know, that give the most damning evidence to indicate, you know, that I knew what I was doing and I planned to do it. Which that's the whole big $64,000 question was how complicit was Ruby in the whole shooting of Oswald? Did he just need to be there at the scene and then, you know, someone put a gun in his hand and said, right, come on? Or, you know, did he know exactly what he was doing? Was he, you know, apparently he was in some kind of state as well, like he was in a daze. You know, what do you guys? You said it before. What are you guys doing to me? What's happened? You know, I'm Jack Ruby. Why are you hitting me and things like that? So it's still so incredibly confusing. You know, there's so many different strands to this. You know, did Jack Ruby wake up that Sunday morning knowing what he had to do that day? Was he meant to do it earlier on in that weekend, you know, during the press conference? Apparently he was there, you know, in the Friday midnight press conference. And when he didn't go through with it, you know, it took that meeting with, what's his name, Hank Olson and his girlfriend in the parking garage at around 2:00 on the Saturday morning to get him back into line. There's just so much. And that's what I just hope to, you know, shine a light on and just say, look, there was always so much that just got missed. You know, I know Burt Griffin, he probably wrote the most about it over the years, and you know, I think you had a guest on recently that you know did spoke with Burt Griffin and you know his views in later years about the Warren Commission and things, but it's still just
Well,
it's a
he's gone the
very
opposite of how people usually do with time. With time, people admit that might have been mistakes, and Burt Griffin has gone the opposite. He admits that the Warren Commission did a perfect job. When his HESCA testimony, when he's in court, and there's all these people of higher authority around him, he's stating that the Warren Commission sacrificed speed for elections, sacrificed a lot of things, and that is on tape in the LBJ library. They've only digitized, I think, 45% of the JFK stuff that's related to LBJ phone calls. So there's a lot more out there. But again, there's a lot of confusion and a lot of stuff that starts leading into different theories. And the one thing I think when we look at, like with Ruby, for instance, could he have been paid? Wasn't he supposed to be coming from Western Union? Is that what they're saying? But didn't he have money and stuff in his car? And didn't he have a dog in his car? Didn't he have a bunch of bills of H.L. Hunt, newspaper magazines, whatever his little story is in the back seat of his car as well, too? Or in his trunk. So again, if he was paid, a lot of people think Ruby owned multiple clubs. He owned one. His brother gave him a loan to rebrand the club. I think I showed you this clip, and also I showed Tim Smith from the HSCA audio tapes where they interviewed Earl Ruby, and Earl said, no, the Silver Spur, whatever it was called, is the Carousel Club. It was rebranded. His brother gave him a loan of $5,000. Now he did that and put all the ad stuff out for it. Next thing you know, all the clubs are closed down, or he had to close his club because everybody else is closing their business down because the president's been assassinated. So now you're losing money that you don't have. Could someone have bribed him and caused him to do this? And he was thinking more about, you know, what he's going to lose compared to, you know, I know the Dallas police. Maybe if I just do this, you know, they'll let me out and I'll be out on the street by the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what the other big question, and I certainly didn't break this, but I certainly do refer to it in my book and subsequent work, is that Jack Ruby was covered with a bag or some kind of garment within almost a second of being set upon by
It's because
Dallas
it
police
wasn't
officers.
him. That's why. It was a lookalike. I don't know. That's what you hear.
Hey, have a look at the sideburns. Next time you look at the Bob Jackson photograph, have a look at the sideburns of Oswald's shooter. They're,
Look,
they're a
I have a
lot bigger than
friend
Ruby's.
who's Armenian, and I could tell you he could shave his whole body, and the next day he'll have so much hair it looks like a sweater that he's wearing. So I'm not gonna fight that one.
Yeah, cool, cool. But yeah, why? So at the very least, Lewis Miller, the detective that did that, he never had to answer for it. No one ever asked him about it. Yet he was surrounded by 12 other Dallas police officers. So it would have been seen that Jack Ruby or Oswald Shooter was covered instantly. So how would this Detective Miller know to be ready to act like that? So that at the very least, that's foreknowledge on the part of someone in the Dallas police. And then you've got people like Patrick Dean, who I know I've spoken about a lot. This story will interest you. There was Gene Barnes. I don't know if I'm pretty sure I haven't spoken to you about this on the show, but Gene Barnes was in Dallas. He was a cameraman with NBC Hollywood, and he actually hired a few reporters did this, hired off-duty police officers to drive them around that weekend.
Where he was at Parkland Hospital, right? He got the news before about going to
Yeah,
Parkland.
that's
Yeah.
right. That's right. Just a little bit after that, the same police officer that kind of tried to bribe him to pay him $5 to tell him something that everyone was starting to find out then that it was Jack Ruby. Clyde Goodson was his name. He told Barnes that it was an elderly man dressed in a reserves uniform. He had grey hair, dressed in a reserves uniform, who let Jack Ruby in. This was told to this Gene Barnes that day. So I'd love to know who that elderly man in a reserves uniform was. There actually was someone that does fit that description who was in the basement and could have been in position to let Jack Ruby, and that was C.W. Arnett, or Charles Arnett, who was like the reserve captain. So he was like the ranking officer of all the reserves, and there were like 12 in the basement that day, which, when you think about that alone as well, is absolutely crazy, because reserves are volunteering members of the public. Something that
Didn't they burn the other ones, like the main ones, out by Friday and Saturday? So Sunday they only had the reserves left.
yeah, potentially, but reserves are only meant to be used when there's like a massive event, like an emergency, or when the president comes to town. So yeah, maybe a lot of them were
But
used on.
even then, they were on stand down, weren't they? From the orders of the whoever Dallas Police or Secret Service, they said that you didn't need all the hundred and something
I
troops
think
that
that
were
was I think that was regular officers. A lot of regular officers were on stand down.
because they only used the four motorcycle cops, and I think like a couple at the Trade Mart and stuff like that.
Yeah, and Marion Baker had to be a part of that lot as well. But yeah, the fact that there were so many reserve officers at the scene of where Oswald was, transfer was to start, is a bit of a crazy one, because you've got another reserve officer whose name was William Newman. He is literally the only person on the scene who stayed in the same position for like an hour and a half. So he was part of the group of reserve officers that did the search of the basement, that was led by Patrick Dean and this Captain Arnett. And Newman stayed on the side of the basement, which is kind of like under. It's the Commerce Street side of the basement, kind of under the ramp. So he was there when the armored truck was brought in. He could see right across the whole scene. He gave, I think it was 4 statements to the Dallas police for their investigation. No one else gave that many statements. Nobody. And then he spoke to the FBI, and he spoke to the Warren Commission, because they were relying on this guy Newman to verify that he saw Ruby walk down the ramp. But he never could do that, because he wasn't sure that who he saw was Jack Ruby, and even then, if it was before or after the shooting, and the man that he did see got into a scuffle with other reporters, so he just figured it was another reporter. But this guy Newman, he would have seen, if Jack Ruby really did come in the way I and others say Jack Ruby came in, which was down from the building, the down from within the building next door to the city hall, so through the annex building. This Newman character would have seen everything. They would have seen Ruby come out of the emergency, the stairway, which couldn't be locked on the inside because it was an emergency exit for the building above. He would have seen if someone met Ruby come out at that position and get into position. This guy Newman, a very, very suspicious character indeed. Yeah, but the reserve officers, Kenneth Croy, that's a name we all know of. He was right there where Jack Ruby sprang from to shoot Oswald, and he knew Ruby. So was he the person that Ruby was told to go and stand next to, or was led to? It's just such a it's just a fascinating little, well, not little, but just a crime, a real. It took place in front of so many witnesses, yet it's still it's been so undercovered all these years. A lot of witnesses never were asked for their testimony, yet they were right there. Why?
Undercovered, or was it covered and the stuff wasn't released? I mean, I still laugh at that one video we did where you were showing me the pictures. Like, you ever see the full thing? I was like, what? And there's like a mic, a boom mic just coming down like in the middle of the photo. I was like, how did I not see that? Because your brain's so attracted to the image. But again, that's like with the RFK assassination. You have the necktie that's on the ground. Well, Life magazine and all that other stuff cropped it out. Well, it wasn't even RFK's necktie. It was what a lot of people believe is staying Eugene Caesar, because he's seen photos later on in the night that he's not wearing a tie. So that's an important thing. And again, the media doesn't look at that. They center you around focusing on a certain particular piece of the photo, not the whole photo. But again, undercovered, like maybe it's just stuff that we just don't have. Someone's got sitting in a basement somewhere, like I'm not I think there's probably a rational explanation for a lot of stuff. And I've tried to explain, or not really explain, but trying to find a more logical conclusion in a lot of things, because I don't believe it's some grandiose conspiracy. But I believe a lot of people were benefiting, or were trying to move past this thing as fast as possible. And with a hurried investigation causes slip-ups. And now those slip-ups need to be acknowledged, and people should have paid the price for the slip-ups. Again, I watched a video. It's on the Texas history website. It's the JFK. I think it's called JFK Live 1 or something like that. Now, it's footage from the cars arriving at Parkland Hospital and like everything that kind of goes after that. And it's chopped up in like a documentary style. So it keeps showing different clips at different times, people crying out in the street and stuff. I'm going to make a clip on it, but there's a Dallas police officer that when they put the bubble top on, he walked over to the window and spit right in it.
Yeah, right.
It's very subtle, but he literally just went up and he goes and does like the whole face and the spit, like if you're hawking out sunflower seeds on a baseball field. So I saw that and I was like, did he just spit? And I had to rewind it a couple of times. It goes, he definitely spit in the car. Like that's definitely like, you're not looking at it like, looks good. He spit a couple of times. So like, again, I'm going to put that clip up and I'll link it in the description below. But there's a lot of things I think that point out issues or corruption. And I think through our episodes, we've discussed many of the Dallas police ones. But do you think you have a case boiled alone of not looking at who did it, but just saying that there's more here, and that on the basis of what we know about the Dallas police?
Yeah, I think I do. And, I'm not alone in positing that Patrick Dean had something to do with setting up the scene. Now, Patrick Dean was in charge of the the security arrangements for the basement. Him and James Putnam. So Dean oversaw the search with Putnam of the basement. Now the basement is only one part of that area. What a lot of people maybe don't realise is that there was another level, under the City Hall jail. It was a sub basement level, and coming up from there were these passages into the basement car park. So these doors, so they kind of opened up under where the ramps were on each side. Willie Newman was standing near one of those doors on the Commerce Street side. Now, there's no word of any of those points being searched. And that's important because they all lead directly back to the city hall sub basement, and from there people can just and we're able to enter, come and go from there without any hint of security or being stopped. Those two janitors that I talk about in my book, Harold Fuqua and Alfredo Riggs, they were able to get all the way down to the sub basement level. There was no police to stop them from entering off the Harwood Street entrance and walk all the way down to that junction near where Oswald was shot before then turning right and heading down a few flights of stairs. So Patrick Dean that was really basically a show for the media to say that, look, that we did our job. We did actually put precautions into place, but it wasn't thorough enough. The annex building upstairs, that was locked on the inside, and the two main entrances were locked, but there was that side exterior door that led out to the vacant lot outside that it was able to be accessed by those same two janitors, Fuqua and Riggs. So there was just the level of security was non-existent. It was crazy. And then Dean, but he knew Jack Ruby as well, but he was actually tripped up, and this is what I was waiting to hear from. It'd be good to when David Shime's next book comes out, see if Bert Griffin spoke about tripping up Patrick Dean on the stand during the Warren Commission, because Patrick Dean swore black and blue that basement door down from the annex building was locked, and Bert Griffin said to him, "Well, it couldn't have been because it's an emergency exit. It's not meant to be locked because in case of an emergency." "Oh, well, we had a maintenance man to lock that door," it said Dean. And then Griffin came back with, "Well, who?" And I don't know, but it was locked. So he really tripped Dean up on the Warren Commission, and then took Dean off the record for a few minutes and said, "Look, is everything okay? I think you're lying," because he'd already, as part of that same deposition, found inconsistencies in what Dean was talking about with the handling of Jack Ruby up on the 5th floor. So by this point, Griffin takes Patrick Dean aside and says, "I think you're lying. I can help you if you want to be helped, if you do want to tell the truth." Well, Dean took exception to that, finished the deposition, and the story goes that Dean complained to Jesse Curry, who complained to Henry Wade, who took it to Washington, I think directly contacted J. Lee Rankin. And Bert Griffin was recalled back from Dallas, back to Washington, and he was never able to go back and continue the work that he and Hubert had been, were responsible for, which was looking into the Ruby angle.
Well, the HSCA, I think, even interviewed a couple of people, and I have those clipped up on my channel from their testimonies that are members of the Dallas Police. I'm blanking on their names right now. I want to say, no, I don't think it was Patrick Dean. I'd have to look back and put the clips in the description. But they stated that new evidence came to them that it looks like that it was Ruby being let in through a side door.
So not sure. Yeah, Jack Revel.
Yeah,
so
he
was
testified
like,
that.
yeah. So Jack Revel, he was part of the investigation into at the time, in 1963, he was part of the Dallas police investigation. He was a sergeant at the time, so I think he would have been one of the lower ranking members of that investigation. Also in the investigation was Westbrook, who we all know to be a pretty suspicious figure when it comes to November 22nd as well. He was part of the investigation, and the only thing that Westbrook said about the Oswald shooting was that they didn't know if that outside door was actually locked on the day. That's literally all he contributed. So, yeah, Revel would have picked up on that. He would have also got that from Don Fluche. I never know how to say his name.
Yeah, he said he mentioned him in his testimony, and also stated when they asked him if they thought the Dallas police did a good job, he said no, because our job was to protect the president and he's dead. Like, that's the most honest that I've heard of anyone admitting culpability out of this whole case. A lot of people have been denying it. James Rowley denied it. Thought his Secret Service did well, but Revel was the one that was very forward with his answers about the mistakes of the Dallas Police Department, and clearly has their protection issues. So I think he mentions Don Flush, also stating that something about Ruby being let in through a side door.
Yeah. So and that's Don Flush could say that because he was he was actually parked up with his patrol car opposite the annex building on Main Street. So that literally puts him between the ramp. So the ramp is here where Ruby was meant to have walked down. It puts him like literally between there and the Western Union office. Flush was right here on the other side of the road. He knew Jack Ruby, and he said I never saw him walk along Main Street. He was on the other side of Main Street and was able to see the whole space between the Western Union office and the Main Street ramp. And he said, I never saw Jack Ruby that day. So it stands to reason that Ruby, he could have walked across that vacant lot, and absolutely gone in through that side door, whether it was opened for him or if it was left unlocked. The two porters that used it to get out of the building swore that they locked the door after them. They may well have, I'm sure they did. But someone, whether it was Patrick Dean or someone on his orders, I'm very sure. I don't see how else Jack Ruby could have, if he was coming from the Western Union office, I don't see how else he could have got down to the basement in time to be there to not only be there at the time of the shooting, but I think he could have been down there quick enough to actually see Rio Pierce, the car, drive up the Main Street ramp some 56 seconds before Oswald emerged. It was not a long journey, and that was the cool thing about going to Dallas, was being able to trace those steps, and it really is. You get a sense of it on Google Maps, but when you're there, walking across the vacant lot and even walking from the Western Union west along Main Street to the ramp, they're not long distances. It's all very close, kind of like Dealey Plaza. You think it's a fair distance, but it's not. So 100%. Whoever was saying that, Revel, no doubt he was onto something. People at the time as well. This is something I'm going to pursue a little bit more. But Charles Batchelor was someone that was being spoken about within Dallas police, or kind of whispers that Charles Batchelor was in on letting Ruby in as well. And he was an older guy back then. And, some he could have been wearing some kind of formal police uniform, and maybe that's who Gene Barnes was told about. In terms of the elderly man in a uniform that let Jack Ruby in. So all these interesting little threads, all these little tangents, but there's no way that Jack Ruby came down the Main Street ramp past Roy Vaughan. There were witnesses that back up Roy Vaughan up on Main Street, and the fact that no one definitively saw Jack Ruby walk down the Main Street ramp to the basement, down in the basement, it kind of makes it a lock. Jack Ruby didn't come down the ramp. He said that he did, but he only said that, or was documented as saying that, after he got to speak to his lawyer, Tom Howard. So whether he was fed that line by Tom Howard, who happened to be in the basement at the time of the shooting, standing near the jail office, it's a fascinating little tale. It really is. You couldn't make this stuff up, seriously.
Well, Paul, you give me enough of your time, man. I wanted to have people get a brief summary of you just so we can get them to look at the older episodes that you've done where you've gone more in depth, and also be able to check out your book too, because it is a good book. I love the title. It's a little kind of, I would say not a shout out, but it kind of gives praise to another person with a similar title of their book.
Who is that again?
It's what's
Farewell to Justice?
Yeah, Farewell to Justice, right?
Joan Mellon. Yeah, I know that book. I've got that book. Honestly didn't have that in mind, but yeah, it's a fair point.
Oh, so you didn't do that initially? That's so close, though.
Yeah. Now that you say it, I'm toying with what's next is toying with doing I will do a revised version in a few years' time, because the things which I've been on your show to talk about, like Jeremiah O'Leary and the Burt Griffin side of things. There's so much. There's still so much that could probably warrant maybe another sequel or something like that. I don't know, but it's a rich topic, and it's really cool to be able to talk to you about it. I still have articles that come out on Substack. I actually don't know if you know this, Robbie. I did an audio book slash podcast of my own for the book, where I'm just literally, each episode is kind of summarizes the chapter of my book. I just want people to just get all over the topic, and hopefully pick it up as well. So we've got some other people out there, seriously researching the Oswald shooting. I know it has a lot of interest. It seemed to me it was kind of only on the fringes. People like Ralph Sinkay and others that kind of just go straight to the they want to just focus on the microphone or something like that. They just want to cut straight to the chase. Well, my book says, what if we actually start by looking at how it happened and what people actually said they saw? So using the evidence, it's a sensational enough case. When we begin with that, then when we, as you and I have kind of touched on tonight, when the whole question of whether it was actually Jack Ruby that shot Oswald or not, that's a whole other thing to it, which it needs some serious research. I think there's still some ground out there to dig up on. So, you've been really good with having me on a few times to talk about it, and people at the conference as well. The questions that I got, the subsequent research that people have sent me to do with the Oswald shooting. It's been really cool, and you never know. It might not be such an isolated event from what happened on November 22nd. Because what's to say the people that weren't behind that pulled some strings and made the events of November the 24th happen as well. And from there we've got a potential linkage, and who knows what. We've just got to keep looking, and that's what you always do as well, mate. It's always good to talk to you.
Was anybody in Dealey Plaza repping like a out of the blank shirt or a bumper sticker?
No.
Damn
sorry.
it. Come on, people. We got to make these merch sales, okay? I'm telling you.
Represent.
Yeah, come on. What are we doing out there? All right, Paul.
If I saw anyone with your merch, I would have given them a free copy of my book, mate. I sold a few, but any of your listeners that I bump into, they get a book.
Thanks, Paul.
You have a good crowd.
I'm very appreciative of the time we've done today, and also the time we have in the past on many episodes, and covered a lot of stuff too. Your next book should definitely be about Garrison. I just want you to marinate on that a little bit, because I think someone needs to put it in a format where people are going to be actually understanding of, this is where he stood and this is where he stands, more of a sense of kind of like a praise to him, because he did do good work on certain things. I think he got a little too close to the fire. But again, we all do that from time to time. That's why we take breaks. But again, Paul, thank you so much. I'm going to link all your links in the description below. And thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of Out of the Blank. Stay tuned for our next episode.